And so if you could speak more to how these constructs have been operationalized both in science and in society, and where how that has contributed to the political moment we're in. That'd be interesting for me to hear about.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, the first gesture that you made there was to historicize these concepts. That is that sex is a human construct that we have used in different ways over time to categorize people. And it's a folk concept, and it is in some ways an expert context within science. And much traffic happens between those spaces where people try to appeal to the authority and legitimacy of science to somehow settle in what seems like it could be a politically neutral way, what are really very, very hard human questions. Those of us working in feminist science studies have both utilized and criticized the distinction between sex and gender. So moving that distinction, of course, is necessary analytically, right? To separate out, to denaturalize the category of sex, to recognize that there are dimensions to our existence as sexed beings that are social, that regard norms and expectations, structures, interactions, and identities that are sensitive to context and are quite plastic over geographies, over time, over culture, and exhibit a lot of internal heterogeneity. The critique of that sex and gender distinction by feminist science studies scholars has been that it sort of left biology uncontested. And the idea was it sort of overdid the distinction. And actually, I found that many scientists now are well educated in the idea that there is a distinction between sex and gender. So well educated that it has become rigid, so that a difference measured in the body is assumed to be biology, whereas gender is always assumed to be social. And so the entanglement of the two, the idea that biology itself is a materiality that is happening in a social context, and even that biology is looping back to our gendered expression is really it's really hard to bridge that. And sex and gender have sometimes not been inclusive terms, so that very often when people talk about gender or about sex, they're so monolithic. There's such a singular idea of what sex is and who has a sex, so that in, for example, the women's health realm, and I think we're going to get into this in some of our other work, there is a certain group of people, largely middle class or wealthy white women in Western nations, who are seen as the target for those interventions. And the work has come to focus around sex difference findings, where you get unitary categories, all men and all women. And a great deal of heterogeneity is lost in that emphasis on sex comparisons. And some of our work has spoken to that. So that's a little primer. Gender and sex, I like to say, are polythemic terms. They are used in multiple ways across different contexts. There is no single meaning of these terms, and it seems vital to recognize that polysemy, so that we can accurately understand what people are conveying or understanding when they use the term.